All right. Hello, hello, hello. If you are watching this video right now, I was going to say that it was going to take it took a monumental, like kind of occurrence, in a way it did, but like, I was going to say it like stars had to align and all that stuff, but really like Derek's like, hey, let's do this. And I was like, yeah, let's do this. And then here we are like a few days later, like doing this. This is probably the easiest content I've ever had to like arrange. So I have with me Derek, fellow RC member. He is known to me, probably known to a lot of other people in the home base, but one thing that he readily would recognize and admit is that he's one of those members that's not as outwardly vocal, like all over the place. Yeah. And part of this today is to one, like change that. And two, we've got some other things that, well, one particular class or category of thing that we'd like to talk about. And he wanted to talk about other things. And I thought about it for a second, but I was like, let's take the opportunity to like fine hone on this one particular subject, because I personally feel once we talk around the edges of it, it actually seeks to help define our perspective on a myriad of other things. So, Derek, if you would.
I'll interrupt you just for a moment.
Yeah.
In terms of what that issue might be that Clay's alluding to, the comments, you have two guesses and the third one doesn't count. So go ahead and set yourself loose. But my name is Derek.
Yep.
My name is Derek on Discord as well. I like to keep it simple that way. My avatar is the Jund Battle Mage, or Thunderscape Battle Mage. And just to give you an idea about myself and how I fit into Pauper Commander, because I mean, it's exploded since I initially got involved in a more elevated way. I was part of the first like wave of writers for the home base website. Salty River, Kyle, at the time ran the site kind of by himself, writing kind of sparse articles about random things that because he played a lot of Pauper Commander. And was putting out feelers on Reddit at the time for people to come on and write about it. People were into the format, passionate about the format, about the history with it. And that was, oh goodness, I mean, time gets away from me. It was at least 4 or 5 years ago at this point. I've been playing Commander since like 2013, Pauper Commander since shortly after that. I'll go into, all this kind of feeds into my opinions about that stuff, but we'll get to that later. Just to keep things on an even keel, because I tend to ramble. Started writing not on a super regular basis. I have a very busy kind of professional life. Stressful life. I do client care, supervisory, managerial stuff for like veterinary hospitals. So it's a lot. So I don't have a ton of time to write. But I was putting out articles just about kind of that 75% space, like sort of higher power casual stuff. More like streamlined advanced deck building and things like that, and practices, and mostly recognizable for my positions on Jund as an archetype, as a mid-range archetype. Madness Jund specifically was like a big focus for me, because at that time, before everything was centralized, there wasn't a lot of information out there regarding certain things. I mean, there's huge gaps in terms of like Pauper Commander knowledge, and in terms of how it existed on the internet. It was just decentralized play groups who just kind of did things their own way. But Madness Jund, for example, is kind of the place where I think that I forth some good blueprints into how things are kind of viewed today. I spent a lot of time exploring that as an archetype, and also like very, very linear glass cannon mono red strategies as well. I did an article about Loyal Apprentice a few years ago when that was first spoiled, of like planning play patterns and consistency, and want to structure your deck to kind of hit certain points. If you're going to be glass cannon, you want to do the same thing every time, that kind of stuff. So once I got all that stuff done, we started kind of talking about centralizing everything. We kind of took everyone's perspectives in terms of the writing staff at the time, because I wanted to home base the kind of the repository of central Pauper Commander. There wasn't really a place for that at that time, other than like MTG Foundation forums. and that your mileage may vary as far as that stuff. Well, so we kind of took our own perspectives. We kind of asked around and did a little research into how other people playing the format, decided on the rules, or stuff, life totals, uncommon commander creature, kind of the basics, the things that would deviate us from normal commander. An emphasis on like ease of use sorts of things. So it would translate easy for people who wanted to make that shift. From there, it's been a long, wild ride. I kind of spent a lot of time lurking on Discords and keeping an eye on things and really engaging outwardly with the community, just because I don't like Discord as an outlet for discussion. My experience, just because I tend to have a very kind of granular mechanical focus on rules and those sorts of questions, that doesn't go over well with a lot of people when they don't like those answers. So it's tough to have that conversation when a lot of it is very nuanced. Kind of tabs on things, pop my head up when things need to get brought under control a little bit, and was asked to be on the rules committee when that was kind of formed. Based on that history. So is that a
No, that's perfect. Yeah, that's
glance back for you.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. Like, so by comparison, I was brought on with a couple of other competitive people because at the time, competitive was starting to get more and more and more attention, and there were some ban considerations at the time that the more casual members of the RC had been, basically mystic-ristic. They were focused on this, and they were going to pull the trigger at some point in time, but decided to kind of put a pause for a little bit, let the competitive-minded people, play with the cards, see what they were like, and then get feedback, and then we would proceed with a ban from there. So that's kind of like my entry into the rules committee there. So by comparison, Derek was actually there in the room where it happened way back when, which listening to him tell the tale of reaching out to the disparate groups, finding out how they were playing, trying to organize not a conglomerate, but like get all these aggregate groups together, get them together, operate under one flagpole. That is not unlike the way that the Pauper Dual Commander Committee operated and formalized themselves just earlier this year. So if you see PDH or PDH regular folks recall that process, watching them come together and work out and iron out the initial, because you had groups all over the planet that were playing 1v1 PDH very differently from one another. So they sought to do the same thing and did the same thing that Derek just explained. So,
these formats have existed for a long time, like before anybody came around and decided to get everybody together and kind of hash out a commonality in terms of rules. I mean, everybody's been doing it their own way for so long. And that's kind of one of the biggest growing pains, and that's how we've been moving forward is, people who have been playing a certain way, and then they look at the way that we've structured the rules and they say, actually, no. And, more power to them, which is totally fine. I mean, I don't purport to be like the end all be all of like, this is how you must play Pauper EDH. That's not it at all. It's just kind of articulated in the past, just a place for untrusted groups to get together and learn together and figure it out.
That's been a huge, you used the 2022 keywordage, trusted, untrusted. That has been huge discussion in the competitive EDH, the big format, because there's always been this salt level between competitives and casuals in the big EDH format, and a lot of that is due to trusted and untrusted gameplay. So to that, I'm a little bit more particular, and you'll find this, like Derek already admitted to like playing more of a higher level PDH, which, kindred spirit. I love it.
Not like competitive, but like
focused and intentional.
Yeah, when I build decks, and this goes for commander, I play a lot of commander as well, which I think is like important if you're gonna try and approach managing a format like this. It gives you a lot of ideas in terms of like what works and what doesn't. But I build a lot of decks, and I do it as like a leisure activity, like to wind down. Taking ideas and building them out and looking at cards and all that stuff, it relaxes me. Like I've got, in the past few years, I've just started to come to terms with like very active adult ADHD. So I'm just kind of like focusing on those outlets now in my personal life. Right way for that, to handle that for me. And so when I'm building decks, it's usually very laid back, pauper, regular commander, whatever. When I play, I'm much more keyed in and engaged. So like in regular commander, for example, I play like lower power, higher synergy decks with a much more competitive focus in game, if that makes sense. Which is something that translated very easily into Pauper EDH for me, because it is the card pool is much more variations on a theme. It's like very nuts and bolts kind of magic, lots of redundancy, which really engaged that part of my brain, like slightly a little bit below competitive level, like where you can still do some pretty novel things, but you don't have to commit yourself to like that. If you take it to an untrusted group, necessarily it'll upset people or anything like that. You're executing a game, you're executing a cohesive game plan in a way that people can recognize is not offensive to their sensibilities.
Yes, people and their sensibilities. That's one of the reasons why we're here today, is people and their sensibilities.
It is, yeah.
So to touch on one last thing before we get onto the main topic. So briefly, let's talk about so it has to deal with visibility, members of the RC who are visible, not visible, that sort of thing. I do recognize that some concerns that were shared earlier this week have some validity, nuanced validity to them. You recognize that too, which is part of the impetus for being here as well. Let's take a minute to briefly talk about some of the lesser known members. Like myself, y'all are on Crash, Alctron, Pod, to some extent, Paul.
Everybody.
Yeah.
But there's a few that have kind of faded out as time has gone on that I haven't heard much from, like Ruffigan, for example, I think is still around.
I hear from Ruffigan all the time. So, okay, so let me start here. Okay, so
you're more social about these things than I am, certainly. So like that wouldn't surprise me at all.
So let's start from this perspective. So for those of you who may or may not know, the Rules Committee has their own Discord server. In that Discord server, we house not only the PDH Rules Committee, the broader PDH Rules Committee, but we also have the 1v1 Rules Committee as well in there. Each has their own separate distinct channels that they operate in, with one like generalized area. It's all right. You look beautiful. But yeah, with one generalized area where everybody can interact. There's also a separate managers. I'm actually a managing member of the Rules Committee. There's 4 of us. It's myself, Rufkin, Scarecrow, and Pod.
Makes sense.
So I interact with Pod and Scarecrow and Rufkin on a pretty regular basis. Ruffigan and Scarecrow handle, as far as like communications are concerned, handle the
right, like
Reddit side,
Reddit stuff and all that. Yeah,
right, Reddit stuff. Pod has the website and the Facebook, and then you've got me, the wild card, doing whatever in the hell it is that I want to do, because nobody can stop me. So that's kind of that. And then of course now Alk has got doing content, like crazy, so
I mean, I've kind of ebbed and flowed in terms of my engagement things. I always lurk. I mean, it's always kind of like my MO. I always just keep tabs on the discussions and make sure nothing is going wild.
Yeah.
But no, I mean the PDH pod is great, and the hedge trigger stuff that they're doing now is awesome. I spent a lot of time over the last month and a half or so, like consuming a lot of competitive content.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been really enjoying it. Just that's not a side of the format that I've been more regularly exposed to, so it's good to see how it all works. More modern context, I guess, especially with what you guys are doing in terms of developing like more of a definable metagame and something that track, I think is really important. And I've also kind of stretched my legs a little bit, like brewing more competitive stuff. I think my single post in the Tryhards Discord server was a Sakari Infiltrator deck list in the deck list thingamajigger you got going on there.
Yeah, the little forum deal. Yeah, that's a great little tool that they added to allow for, number one, the forums are more searchable, and they're better at like organically containing all of the relevant information towards that deck list. So if a brewer wants to, I'm getting way off, but like if a brewer wants to,
Oh, no,
like,
we can get way off. I don't know if you have any significant time constraints. I can get way off. I
yeah,
mean,
no doubt. But
we can
yeah,
talk.
if a brewer wants to dig deep, if they're unsure, right, of what the edges are and they want to dig deep, they can enlist the community and crowdsource. That's always been the strength of the perspective that I take, is that I am an idiot with a microphone. You can see it.
Oh,
It's right.
sure. Yeah.
It's right there. Like, I will always profess my ignorance, because I recognize that not everything is not knowable. You can't know everything. So it's always a journey. So I'm relishing the journey, and we're, but this defines, so my role
For
within
sure.
my role within the rules committee, because I mean, if you want to talk about it, like, even certain RC members don't think that I belong there, but I digress.
So there have
If
been a lot of heated discussions, but they've all
yeah,
kind of worked themselves out and resolved themselves one
correct.
way or the other, and I think we're all the better for it. I don't think that it's had
It
any kind of
takes
lasting damage on the group or the format. So
it takes a
it's
village. It
been
takes all kinds, that sort of
exactly,
thing. I
exactly,
bring I
and
bring strengths that Derek's don't, and Derek brings a whole lot of strength that I don't, which you're about to
yeah, like
hear.
you're referencing now, like there's kind of the the managing group that you have with Rufkin and Pod and Paul, and there's other people that are sort of known for different things, and their strengths are different things, and they chime up more about different things. And in my I don't know if this is recognized by people, but certainly my view on it, how I perceive it, is kind of rules wonkiness, and format structure,
Mm,
and making sure that the lines are defined and everything. That sort of like a gritty, granular stuff that people don't like having conversations about.
mm.
I find that all very fascinating and engaging. So that's kind of where I talk up and speak up the most, is like in those sorts of discussions where we're trying to kind of find the how to interpret rules and things like that. I like that stuff.
All right. All right. This is a good time as any. Okay.
Right, huh?
So the reason why we're here, I mean, not the main reason, but the main reason why we're here, backgrounds. So this has been a highly contentious topic since they were spoiled. This is one of the few things that I can remember in the last like 18 months, 2 years, whatever, that I've been a part of the RC, that the conversation like didn't stop after like a couple of days. Like it was almost, maybe not consistently for like months, but it was like
Yeah.
back and forth, trickle, trying to gauge, get an understanding, trying to figure out what the rest of the planet was doing with regard, because we do look to other formats for guidance, to see how they're handling, see how the mothership's handling it. We're trying to gather all these inputs and talk about this thing, and trying to figure out exactly how these backgrounds are going to interact with our format, considering they weren't made for us. So I think I pulled it up. Oh, so there's 21. One is a creature and a common, so largely regarded, doesn't count, just on many fronts. There's
Yeah.
5 common ones, and then the rest, so 6.
Like, yeah, I think there's 2 uncommon cycle, or 10 uncommons.
10 uncommons,
There
yeah.
might be two uncommons of each color.
So 21 minus 6 is 15. So 15.
Hmm.
If my math,
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah, because
yeah.
Feywild. So yeah, it's 3 of each. 3 of each. I was trying to think of the blue ones. It's Sword Coast and Delver and Feywild. So yeah, 3 of each.
It's been a while since I've had to count all of them.
I know. I know.
So yeah, I mean,
Sometimes.
so we had less discussion on the Mystic Ristic ban than we had for
Yeah.
backgrounds. Backgrounds, by and large, is the most in depth, most researched, most debated, right?
Yeah.
So like, yeah, go ahead. Yeah, the floor
I
is
mean, it
yours.
was, for those of you who don't know, which is everybody, because I've never spoken publicly about it, I don't think in any kind of format. Like we've alluded to, I've never been particularly forward-facing for a couple different reasons. But recently, I've started kind of trying to change that a little bit, like being more active on Twitter and engaging in community there, and not necessarily on Discord. I did join the tryhard server, like I said,
Mhm.
a little over a month ago. I posted a competitive deck list, which was a fun and exciting. And so yeah, I mean, we're moving forward, but back to it. I was one of the, I think, primary no's on common backgrounds in the command zone, or one of
And
the
to put a
most
pause on that,
vocal people about it. Yeah.
I was a yes. So Derek and I are coming at this from, see, this is why this is perfect. We're coming at this from two different perspectives. And go ahead.
Get out of the way, ultimately it's not a matter of like who's right, who's wrong. In that kind of a setting, we don't require a unanimous vote. So it's just kind of, who makes the most sense to the most people. That way it is a little bit democratic. I have other thoughts about that, but we'll keep going. Was a pretty strong no on common backgrounds in the command zone. And just to kind of go through my reasoning on it first, before we kind of dive more into it, for me, I look to, so when it comes to managing Pauper Commander, from a rules committee perspective, I think it's important to look at Commander itself and how that format is managed. It may not be the most popular opinion, but I think Sheldon Menery is like fantastic job with that format, despite people's misgivings about some of the decisions that he takes or opinions that he has. And it is wildly successful. So I think we have a lot to learn from it. I think it's really valuable to kind of dip your toes into both tools. There's a very common amongst Pauper EDH players to not like normal Commander EDH for a number of reasons. We kind of attract a lot of people who are disaffected in that way. So it can be tough to communicate that stuff sometimes. But as far as backgrounds go, the choose a background text on a card, and I'll bring up because it kind of stems from the comprehensive rules. Let me just bring that up on my screen here. I'm going to go through it here so I have it in front of me. So when it comes to backgrounds, oh shoot, it's not loading. My Google Doc, there it is. Sorry, my laptop is slow. All my stuff is still, a lot of my stuff is still packed. I just recently moved. So choose a background. So two parts of it. The first is that is a variant of the partner ability. I think important, and I'll get to that later. But second, choose a background in the comprehensive rules. Choose a background, I'll just read it, is a variant of the partner ability that represents a static ability. Choose a background means you may designate two cards as your commander as long as one of them is this card and the other is a legendary background enchantment. And obviously you can't designate two cards as your commander if one is choose a background ability and the other is not a background, etc. But I think, we all know that in normal EDH, your commander has to be a legendary creature. In the comprehensive rules for background, it specifically says you have to that the background has to be a legendary enchantment. Because also count as your commander, it's important for backgrounds to have that legendary super type. Otherwise, it wouldn't work, right? Like that's kind of the through line of what can be your commander in ADH is it has to be legendary, and then they've since like updated, planeswalkers to be legendary. I think in an effort to kind of make it so that planeswalkers that can be your commander make a little more sense. But it out that way in the rules is a little redundant to me, or reads redundant to me, which just emphasizes the importance of that qualifier in terms of having a card in your command zone counting as your commander. So taking that information and kind of adapting it into Pauper Commander, it's recontextualizing, okay, what finds your commander in P, right? And for us, it's primarily keyed off of rarity, not legendary status. So, said, I do think it's very important for anything that is going to be your commander to sit in the command zone to be uncommon. Does that make sense? I know I kind of went off in a couple places. I tend to
No,
ramble a little bit, but
no. That makes
yeah.
yeah. That's the point. Is for the people.
And before you go into it, just maybe if this helps make it a little more make a little more sense. Well, they released a cycle of like legendary partner with cards that partnered with a non-legendary creature.
Mhm.
Would that be allowed in EDH? If the answer ends up being in a case like that, yes, then I'd certainly reconsider my position here. But in the absence of that, I don't think it's appropriate.
Yeah, and I think I alluded to that very specific thing. Like WotC in the end is the indirectly in control of how this all eventually pans out, because if
Yeah.
and we talked about this, people talk about planeswalkers all the time. If they print an uncommon planeswalker that says this can be your commander, that's going to put us in a tough spot, you know. So
I mean, yes and no, but yeah.
But one of those things. Well, the problem is never. So is as the more ignorant one. I'm always self-deprecating, so don't worry about it. As the
By all
more
means.
ignorant one of the two of us, right? My main concern is how the average person off the street is going to encounter this format, and is that our rule set understandable, like easily understandable? Can we easily put two and two together and like, oh, okay, this works because of this? Now, backgrounds challenges are, I mean, there's even now after the decision, it still challenges our ease of communication, even though we can righteously say Pauper Commander is about uncommons in the command zone. There are uncommon backgrounds. There's also common, but there's uncommon backgrounds. Obviously, we're going to link because also there are rare backgrounds. There are also, is there a mythic? I don't know. I didn't look up any.
In the precons, there were a couple, I think. Yeah.
So there are various levels, various rarities of backgrounds, and there are various levels of or rarities of creatures. So because we chose uncommon creatures, uncommon backgrounds, that's the parallel. So I know that is a very simplified version for explaining this. I know it gets a little bit more complicated.
I think that how intuitive it may or may not be. I think a lot of the people that we do get who are kind of approaching things for the first time, they tend to ask, like, for example, like, hey, I'm just starting, is Candlekeep Sage legal? Mm-hmm. The fact that they're asking, I don't think is a failure in any given way. It just means that they are trying to parse information. The fact that
somebody made the
yeah.
brilliant observation that if the common backgrounds weren't so much damn better than the uncommon backgrounds, then nobody would be asking. Yeah, nobody would be asking. If they all sucked, nobody would be asking. So
and just to go off that a little bit, in terms of this decision was never about power level.
Yeah.
Metagame considerations, anything like that, not coming from a competitive background, and go ahead, sorry.
Well, for me, okay, so to put a slight pin in that, for me, it was, but only from the perspective of, and this is always true, like we talk about our comparison to the larger EDH format. One thing that I will always endeavor to do is to, and our RC does a really good job of this, is to look at our format from the perspective of the LGS, right? Organize, structured, play. And that's where my heart is being able to have this format promoted in that more official environment beyond the kitchen table. And the reason why, and Alcadron will tout this, from the highest of hills, casuals would do whatever it is that they want to do, whenever it is they want to do it, damn the RC. And rightfully so. Rightfully so. So from that perspective, that's the only reason why I was considerate and will be always considerate of what's going to happen in the LGS based off of these decisions. So,
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And, I never want to tell anybody how they should or should not be playing. That's not what it's about. It's just you come to it from like a rules committee perspective, right? Like we're managing the structure of the format. Like we are responsible for setting the lines that people can color within. You can still color outside of them. They're just lines. But we have to have something there. Either things matter or they don't. Um, So it has to be done. Whether you choose to, acknowledge them or not is up to you. But there has to be a baseline, and that's kind of what my focus is, like how I approach my responsibilities as a member of the committee.
So let's go back. Let's talk about this same thing from a historical perspective, because I say all the time, incorrectly but correctly, convolutedly correctly. I say all the time that the origins of the format didn't care so much about, and that's true and that's untrue at the same time. You said it yourself. The nuance there is that some of the disparate groups around the globe were considering common creatures in the command zone and that's the thing. They were looking at the format from a budgetary perspective, where eventually the power level of the card will suss out the better from the bad and not necessarily rarity, as long as it was a sub-rare format. So I tout that all the time as like, the origins of the format, which is true and untrue at the same time, but I like playing in those luminous areas, right? So,
I mean, it's good. It's good information to have. I mean, if you're interested in any way and how you are, it's important to understand that kind of stuff.
absolutely. But see, what I also have learned to tout after the fact. So that's point number one that I make. Point number two, quickly behind it, is that the Great Unification. That's the thing that you were a part of.
Right.
The Great Unification standardized that. So therefore eliminating the common rarity as eligible in the command zone. And that was when, like 2016, 2019, when was that?
Oh, goodness. I mean, I don't even know anymore. Like 2017-ish, 2016, 2017-ish is when I'd estimated. But I could go back and like look at the home base website and
so
writing really for that time period.
What I'm doing by highlighting that is long before Wizards of the Coast ever decided to print a partner anything, it was decided.
Time, actually, maybe, yeah. Because partner was what, 2016 Commander?
Oh, true, yeah. But still, like, I guess we didn't have any that partners then were they rare or were they
uncommon partners? I think they're all mythics in those pre-constructed decks. Yeah.
So long before partners were considered in our format, get our facts straight there. We didn't have those effects. We didn't have anything to be considerate of. We couldn't even dream. I was still playing competitive 1v1 EDH at that time. There was no consideration for these types of effects. So it was deemed then that uncommon rarity for the command zone was the way to go. Now, there is a little bit of a maintenance of tradition with
somewhat, yeah.
So, but that gets a little sticky too. And as Derek, for those of you out there that are like, well, my daddy did it, that sort of thing. He already alluded to the fact that, and this is true, I can vouch for this, that we are still fluid in our decision making when it comes to, just depends on the amount of information that's, brought to us. We also, as alluded to, we did healthily and readily debate the nuances of this stuff, sometimes in a heated way. It is, let's get back to that democracy thing. In this instance here, I don't mind somewhat of a best argument wins type of scenario. I mean, the vote was split 6-4. I don't know if that was put out in Alc's article. So it was 6-4. One of those things, myself and others, we shot our shot, and that was the deal. Like there's a modern term for disagree but support, something like that.
Goodness.
But yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure there is. It doesn't come to me immediately, but whatever.
So yeah, like ultimately that's the decision. I can see the validity of that side, so I don't have any, if I was going to fall on my sword, I would have done it a long time ago. It's not worth it. So let's talk about the democracy. So what about the democracy of votes? Because not all of our votes are that way. Some have actually a threshold, right?
So I mean, it's something where, like you said, I don't have a problem really with that kind of either like the put it wins, right? That's fine by me. It can be a little tricky sometimes if people aren't willing to go along with that. We haven't run into that issue yet. If there's something that people want to carry beyond a vote in that way, into issues with that kind of stuff we haven't yet. Knock on wood, but there always is a possibility. And I think that any kind of democracy and sort of to the format and managing the format should be left up to the rules committee. Makes sense. I don't believe in being by the will of the community. That might be like a bitter pill for some folks to swallow. I know like the more vocal members are very big on, do what is popular. I am not that way. If you look at like anytime there's big changes to any major format, you look at social media and it's a lot of people saying I could do this better, when in reality reasons that they disagree may not make sense or may not be like glaring holes that may just not be healthy for the format at all. There are people who are making decisions. Yeah.
And what they're glossing over. There's a tremendous
one or two big things.
There's a tremendous amount of work that goes behind the scenes.
And that's kind of the hardest thing is, why should people trust us to make these decisions? And in one respect, I think we've done like a pretty good job with the decisions that we've made. I think that, we're growing a lot faster than not. I think that we're on an upward swing in a couple big ways. Content's getting out there, and
we're coming for you, Penny Dreadful. We're coming for you.
People doing, I'm doing my part, that kind of thing. And we're getting out there and word and responding favorably, and it comes to a controversial decision like common backgrounds, like tough, because ultimately the result of our decision is they are not legal in the format. They're not, I don't like the language that some people use where they say that it is effectively banned. It's not allowed. It's not legal.
It's ineligible. Yes.
Right. It's not saying that something is not legal is not as exclusionary as saying that it is banned. And that goes a long way to flavor discourse.
The second thing that does that is the impact statement associated with it. Well, like using planeswalkers as an example. Right now, there is no uncommon planeswalker that would break the format. So people's view when they talk about legality is like, oh, well, everything's fine until it isn't.
Yeah, they view it through a lens of, would this be okay for, average game if it was legal as a commander? And in most cases, that certainly might be the case. But it's one of those things where it just doesn't fit a criteria that we've established.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to be conservative about where we make exceptions, where we choose to make exceptions, if we do at all. It should always be the exception rather than the rule.
But to that point, and even with, I would even extend this to common backgrounds, because this is something that I advocate for all of the time. Um, not so much for kitchen table groups because we never see the results of their gameplay, right? But people who are active in communities, who post and share results and deck lists and stuff like that within communities, regular PDH and CPDH alike, brew with those planeswalkers, brew with those common backgrounds. And the reason why is because you can disregard everything that we say, but also that's a data point. That's experience. What if one day, and I'm not tainting but what if one day we're forced with a decision, we have some real information behind that. Now, I don't think Derek would disagree with having that availability, right?
Right. And to kind of, and it's something where, particularly on a competitive end of things, I would absolutely expect people to want to have as many toys to brew with as possible.
Bingo.
And like, I think that the format is worse off for not having access to these backgrounds in the command zone. No, I don't. Going back to the video that you cut recently, going over the metagame statistics, I watched that. And I think the resounding
So
conclusion
you
was
were the
that
one person. You were the one person that
I'm,
watched.
I'm that one. And, my conclusion, and this is your conclusion as well, is that, it's a brewer's paradise. Those were the words that you used.
Mm-hmm.
Deciding to not include these cards as being legal in the command zone is going to make it less of a brewer's paradise. It could make it more of if we changed the rules to allow for it, but I don't think it's necessarily appropriate. I don't think it's a step that needs to be taken.
Mm-hmm.
What I mean in terms of being conservative, like, is this a step that we need to take? What does it take away? And when it takes away nothing,
Mm-hmm.
I'm particularly convinced.
The only deck that I
Yeah,
can think of that
yeah.
it most directly impacts, and it's not even that significant of a margin. I mean, it's a hit. Is Abdel, because
Yeah,
Candlekeep Sage
you're gonna
gives
say
you the
that, yeah.
ability to draw on that
It's
flicker,
busted.
and yeah. So so there's one. Yeah, if you could think of
No,
another
yeah,
one, comment in
there's other
the.
things you can do. Just to kind of let you into sort of what I've been doing in the commander space. I've been working on Heritage Druid a lot lately,
Mm,
and Master Chef is really powerful.
mm-hmm.
Felt like that. Um, but I've already written 3,500 words on that commander that I'm working on right now. I haven't yet, but I'm working on it. But I mean, yeah, like you said, Brewer's Paradise. Like, I wouldn't feel comfortable brewing Heritage Druid if I didn't feel like there's a way to make this work.
Mm,
Mono green is nonsense generally in the competitive end of things. Like, you have your Teamer Sabertooth, and um, what does what interested in it more was like, what does a non-combo green deck look like, and what does it need? You know,
card draw.
yeah, and then there's ways to do that.
Yeah.
For example, like the current state of my Heritage Shooters list, it has like 51 or 2 creatures,
Mm-hmm.
and 20 of them are 1-drops. To take Heritage Druid on turn 2 for 3
Mm-hmm.
additional mana to land Elvish Guidance, Timberwatch Elf, Master Chef, any number of things that just like break the game wide open.
Mm-hmm.
Like, those are kinds of considerations that you can make, where you don't necessarily need a ton of card draw if you can engineer the cards that you do have, like Lead the Stampede and You Meet in a Tavern, to draw you 3 or 4 cards on average. Just, translate your velocity into something meaningful. So, but not to get too far off topic, to get back to the brewing aspect of things, I brew all the time. That's just an example. Normal commander, pauper commander, I'm always building decks. I always have something that I'm working on or something on the back burner.
Yep.
To get back to PDH and like commons as commander, for example, like, biggest draws and one of the most attractive things I think, or intriguing things for somebody coming to Pauper EDH Fresh is an uncommon creature in the command zone. That's something, that's a context under which like nobody playing Commander has ever viewed any of these cards.
We,
Like it recontextualizes
right,
everything.
right, and we already have issues currently with normies, right? Who are like, well, why don't we just stick to uncommon legendaries? And it's like, whoa, time out. You know, you're
Well, that's
cutting
where
off.
like the identity of the format comes into play, right? Like
Mm.
we
So you
couldn't do
can't
that back in
have,
the day.
you can't be half in the bag. That's what I'm trying to point out here. If we consider it a valid thought that you know, excluding regular uncommon creatures would be detrimentous to the format, because you know, spirit of the format, then why is it such a big leap to think that maintaining that uncommon identity with the command zone and not extending that to the common backgrounds? Why is that such a strange thought when by and large every PDH player's reaction to just moving forward with common or uncommon legendaries, that's offensive, you know?
Yeah.
It
Yeah, I
is.
mean, yeah, it kind of goes back. And that's, I think, taking a more now that they've printed more common legendaries, it kind of flavors people's view if they haven't been exposed to the format before. Because obviously, and you know this, and people who are enfranchised in the format know this, is back in the day the only uncommon commanders we had were the vanilla legends from Legends, pretty much, and like Nagao Bound by Honor from Kamigawa, or like one or two cards like that. Um, and you couldn't really play unless you gave yourself a little bit of a bigger sandbox to work in.
Correct.
And plus, to kind of go back to something I said earlier, the nature of the Pauper card pool, I really like using the phrase variations on a theme, right? You have counter spells, bajillions of cards that have the text counter target spell. They just have different riders, different
Yep.
conditions, different things. So it's a lot of redundancy around simple effects, but those little changes matter. And the truly novel things mostly occur in the uncommon slot, in your commander slot. That's why it's so important who your commander is, right? To go back to Heritage Druid, like the deck tested a couple different elves builds, and couldn't to the speed and velocity and board presence that I wanted if I didn't have access to a mana dork on turn one.
Mm.
And everything felt slow and vulnerable. Not something that I could translate into a mid or even a late game.
Mm.
But Heritage Druid not only does that, like it's a 1 mana elf, that instead of needing a turn 1 mana dork, you just need 3 elves as soon as you can get them on the board.
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes do that by turn 2 by building a density of 1 mana elves of whatever they are. It doesn't matter. Universal Automaton's a great one. It doesn't get hit by breath weapon, right? So you can build in, and when that's the only condition that you have, you can pick and choose ones for resilience.
Mm-hmm.
Universal Automaton's a great example of that. Elves that are really easy to get out of sweeper range. Those are great choices as well. Like there's a lot of ways that you can finagle it to kind of get the desired effect to your desired metagame. It's a really deep archetype, and I've been really fortunate to kind of be able to dive in deep and learn a lot about it. But yeah, it's that kind of thing. You get your truly novel effects that uncommon. The deck wouldn't work without Heritage Druid, and need that sort of lens to use to make those seemingly innocuous riders matter and be relevant in a game. And that's
Yep.
where you get more novel interactions rather than novel designs on cards.
Mm-hmm.
That's where a lot of the depth of the format comes from. But just to bring it back to kind of a surface level, when people come in, uncommon legend, the uncommon creature in the command zone, everything looked different, and it's an environment that they have never explored before. A huge environment, which is why opening up common creatures as commanders is again something that I don't think would necessarily add or detract anything. It would just make us change a rule, which again is something that I'm resistant to do unless there's a compelling reason to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Are we really at a loss, or are we starving for options in the command zone? No, and fire design is going to give us more exciting things. It's going to give yeah, it's going to give us more exciting cards in the uncommon slots. It's going to give us more uncommon legendaries. It's going to power up the format just as it's powering up everything and change the way we do things. But that's normal growth. That's normal growth, right? I mean, everybody goes through that.
So it's
Yeah,
almost
I
a
mean,
safe side. It's almost a safe side to maintain, like have a strict adherence to that uncommon eligibility in the command zone because it protects the format in the face of Wizards and Hasbro and their money making machine and just print, ban, ban,
yeah,
ban.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I mean that's certainly a part of it. It's kind of this weird amalgamation of tradition, but traditions that are based on things that are real considerations. It's kind of like a weird amalgamation of different things that you can't really separate it out into those disparate pieces. It's kind of one unique monster unto itself, and it's kind of tough to reconcile that sometimes. Like, um, it's a really unique space to try and manage. And I certainly appreciate people who are willing to give us the patience to kind of feel it out. Most things are easy, like adventures. I think when there's a big discussion when adventure creatures came out, like how do we do it? And to
Oh
me, it
yeah.
was so simple. It's just like they both count as your commander, and you pay tax. And if it goes to exile, you can cast a creature half. Like it just works.
Yeah.
Um, Things are a little more need a little more massaging, and I think uncommon and common backgrounds is that kind of more nebulous
Well,
space.
when you brought up the adventure thing, the first thing I thought in my head was Tolarian Community College. The professor's like, magic is ruined forever. Every new
Yeah,
mechanic that comes out, magic is ruined forever. Magic
adventures are
players,
great.
yeah,
Nothing bad to
Magic
say about
players have
adventures.
been saying the downfall of Magic for 30 years now. So,
No, I mean, again, man, I really love this Heritage Series list that I'm working on. Adventures are amazing at common because it's card advantage for don't have access to traditional card
yep,
advantage.
white,
You,
yep.
you just get really powerful effects on both ends. The white cards from Baldur's Gate have been fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
In Heritage Druid, Dread Lenorm is one of the best Fierce
Yes,
Empath
yes.
targets I have. Um, Fierce Empath is a card that was printed a common for some reason,
And
and
largely did
it
nothing
gets no
for
redemption
a
spell.
while. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's another one of those weird elves that just kind of existed in Onslaught block, and from 25 years ago. And yeah, I mean, Dread Lenorm's a great card. There's all kinds of ones in there. I mean, Sea Hag. I don't know if you're familiar with Sea
Mm-hmm.
Hag at all. That card's very powerful. Like, great combat trick. It's great to enable things like Tepnos High Priest and an aggressive like mid-range shell. Um, and you can flicker it and blank everybody's combat steps. So it's
Stonehorn Dignitary.
exactly, except it's got two halves instead of just one.
Right.
Um, yeah, but no, I mean those things have really improved
Righteous.
quality of life for a lot of underserved archetypes and colors. Yeah.
Well, we've been going for 53 minutes. I know it seems
Hmm.
like we just started.
Yeah,
Um,
I could keep going as long as
well, my main concern is that we'll hit the most relevant parts at hour
right.
2 and nobody will watch it. So let's take an opportunity in the last couple of minutes to kind of synthesize. So backgrounds, contentious. Seems like they always will be contentious.
Just like
Uh,
Planeswalkers, yeah.
just like planeswalkers, in the eyes of newer converts, I surmise that the uncommon creature, the blanket uncommon creature clause for eligibility in the command zone, will be somewhat contentious moving forward because of all the legendaries being printed. I am saying that if we are considerate of the deep, rich history in PDH that the uncommon creature, the uncommon rarity has had in the command zone, legendary or not, then we, from my perspective, should be considered. Yes, I want common backgrounds in the command zone, but from a very particular perspective, in order to protect the format, uh, keeping that as a uncommon only eligibility is probably not a bad idea. It's probably the best protection from that perspective for the
That's kind of
format.
how I approached it. It's we set up these rules and we need to abide by them. And I think it's just kind of finding the line of best fit sometimes. People may differ where that lies, but ultimately it's all in service of the same goal. So, I don't think you could go wrong either way. But I just think the way that we've defined things, the way that we've set it up, and the way we've been operating for so long, I don't think it includes common backgrounds in the command. So I think it's as simple as that. And
So
again, it may not be the most,
point, like I thought of another way to articulate it. So in the beginning, so the story that I always throw out about commons and uncommon eligibility in the command zone and what have you, the way those folks were phrasing it is very intentional and relevant here. They were looking at rarity less than rare in the command zone. So it wasn't like uncommon and common creature. It was less than rare for eligibility.
I think coming to the format, when I first got introduced, to me, it felt like, whereas in EDH you have your deck and then you have kind of that creature that leads it, that is kind of special, like a cut above, right? You lose that when you don't have access to legendaries in the command zone Pauper. So like, how do you articulate that? Pauper, obviously, with the 60-card format, it's all commons. So, and granted, like this was not make this rule for the uncommon in the command zone. It's just how I rationalized it when I came into the format. That more special to lead a bunch of commons than like an uncommon, right? It's just like the next logical step up. So it always made sense to me that way.
If they didn't, I think what's hard is if they didn't have some common creatures that are as powerful as, right now that all gets based on old design versus new design versus the push design, fire design. You're starting, yeah.
By no means the exception in terms of like wanting to brew sometimes with common cards. Like I have a deck that I'm workshopping a little bit. It's a Rule Zero deck. It has partner commanders, Set a Disciple, and Thornscape Apprentice. So I can have a 4-color deck without breaking anything in half, and it's just like a weird interactive tempo-ish kind of deck that probably can't win, but it does a lot of the interactions that I like to play with. So I decided to give it a shot, and it's pretty cool. But it is what it is. It's not 2 cards that are not legal in the zone explicitly, but I don't think I'm gonna have a problem convincing people to let me play it. But that's fine.
Well, I'd like to think after this conversation, because I didn't want it to be, and it wasn't. I didn't want it to be like Alex's article was wonderful. It explained, as he puts it, the loser's perspective on this thing, right? And
I love listening to him talk about format. He's very
good.
Yeah.
He's my favorite RC member. I say it all the time.
Yeah.
So I think we were able to just kind of flesh it out a little bit, and I'm hopeful that people will be able to look at these perspectives. And that's the thing. This isn't going to kill or quash this dissent. It's not. I'm hopeful that it brings understanding. That's what I'm looking for. Also,
the most important part. Yeah.
Yeah. And also, for those who are like, not my RC members, I don't know who these people are, that sort of thing. Well, there he is. He's right there.
Yeah.
So I'm going to try to do my best to reach out and bring some other, maybe this is leading the stampede for the other members to get together, whether or not it's with me or they hop on with Dave or somebody else. It by no means is a requisite, because some people are more private than others and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I'm one of them. So.
And the other RCs of the world don't have just a panel full of broadcasting figureheads. There are people that operate behind the scenes, in front of the camera, what have you. So we're not doing anything different that vastly different. So
I think, Ryan made that point in the Discord, is that it's not a necessity, but it helps, right? It builds trust. So, that's kind of what I want to accomplish here by talking to you. And I certainly want to thank you for having me on your platform to discuss it. One last point about kind of rules and how they may not make sense and how some people may not be able to grasp it initially and have difficulty there. Like, other angles to consider, and that's kind of the purpose of this, right? Like, if you think about hybrid mana, and I was thinking about this the other day, like another hot button topic in like regular Commander. We haven't seen so much of that uproar in like our space yet, but as we get more cards, we may once there's another hybrid set, I'm sure
after this video, absolutely, yeah.
Now that it's spoken into existence. But like, if you have a Boros recruit, like hybrid white red 1/1 first strike, and card in your mono white deck, like, makes sense to hydroblast card in your mono white deck. Me, that's like a pretty strong argument for like maybe it does make sense that hybrid mana isn't legal. I wouldn't have thought about that initially going in. It would just be like, well, these cards both, it's a white card, it's a red card, why shouldn't it be? But like, when you think about the format exists, how it feels, and what you want that experience to be like, it starts to make a lot more sense that way. So I just encourage folks to be open to those sorts of arguments and that kind of reasoning, and have those conversations, and not just kind of shutting off when you don't get to play Candlekeep Sage in the command zone as much as you might want to, because, as we said, the card's cracked in half, and
the one card, yes, the one out of the 5. Let's be real here. Everyone's talking about like they want to play that one particular background.
Draw that one card off because you play your commander and you draw a card.
Correct.
Right? That's how it works. So
righteous. Well, Derek, thank you so very much. I appreciate you.
Thank you. Like I said, I really mean it. It's been a real honor to come on and talk to you.
Yeah, now I got to dream up another reason to have you back on.
Happy to, yeah. Whatever you want to talk about.
Righteous. All right.
A heritage druid.
No doubt. So you can find Derek in the Tryhard server. You can find him in the home base server. Any other places?
DREK, all lowercase. That's me. I have a Twitter account at the @ Derek Dear Reader, and that's where I post kind of observations as I have them about cards that excite me in Pauper, like Jasper Sentinel, for example. It's a card that excites me. I tweeted about it. I also have a WordPress blog, a WordPress weblog, where I write about regular Commander periodically. I post this piece that I'm writing about Heritage Druid once it's done. But I also write about Commander there, so you can kind of get an insight into how I build decks. Not necessarily for Pauper. I haven't written about Pauper there yet, but who knows? We might enjoy it.
Hell yeah. See, now it's just another series of content that I gotta start reading every week. Here we go. Righteous. All right, until the next time, friend, we'll go ahead and